Hi, I'm First Lady Frances Wolf, and you are listening to the Bell Ringer podcast.
Hi, I'm Noe Ortega, Pennsylvania's Secretary of Education. Thank you for joining us for the Bell Ringer, a podcast hosted by the Pennsylvania Department of Education. Bell Ringer is a conversation with leaders and changemakers that shines a spotlight on the collective mission of education and its impact on our communities and the public good. My guest today is Dr. Al B. Quarles II. Dr. Quarles has worked for the School District of Philadelphia for 18 years and is currently the Philadelphia Regional Coordinator for the Education for Children and Youth Experiencing Homeless program. Dr. Quarles has conducted extensive research on student homelessness and has been appointed twice to serve on Pennsylvania's Homelessness Task Force. He is a published author and has 30 years experience as an administrator, counselor, and behavioral health professional working with children. Welcome, Dr. Quarles.
Thank you, Secretary Ortega. It's truly a pleasure to be here with you today.
Before we begin, I'd like to start with a bit of a bell ringer activity, something that you may be familiar with. So for listeners who are unfamiliar with bell ringers, they are an activity or prompt that students complete when they first enter the classroom. So for today, there's no doubt, Dr. Quarles, that the past few years have changed the educational landscape forever. What do you feel is one of the most pressing matters in the field of education?
That's a great question, Secretary. I believe that there are a few matters that all kind of tie together. I think, when it comes to education, I think school safety is at the forefront, making sure that our students feel safe and secure when they're in a learning environment, a climate that's conducive to learning. There's nothing like walking into a school and the climate just is refreshing, where students are able to be their best self and truly learn. Bullying policies and prevention are important, a culture of discipline versus punishment. And I think, teacher preparation. I think our teachers wear so many hats today that they really need to have an expansive and diverse toolkit, a culturally diverse response to learning. And I think they just need to really have all of the tools at their disposal to be the best person. I mean, we have students with everything from trauma to, experiencing homelessness, stuff we're about to talk about today. So, I think just really, it's a holistic approach to education, as you know, I'm sure.
Yeah, the expectations continue to grow on our educators.
Yes.
When we become more sophisticated, Dr. Quarles, and understand the different traumas, as you bring up, for different populations, those things become more important for our educators to be aware of, right? That these are the culturally appropriate, culturally relevant approaches to teaching.
Absolutely.
We know the impacts that homelessness, since you brought that up, and this is a big part of your work, can have on children's physical, mental, and social, emotional health. But what are some of the impacts, Dr. Quarles, that homelessness can have on educational outcomes specific for these young kids?
Well, absenteeism is definitely more common among students identified as being homeless. These students miss more school days on average. Students experiencing homelessness are less likely to demonstrate proficiency in academic subjects. Passing rates for English, language arts, math, and science exams were lower than for their housed counterparts. In some cases, students experiencing homelessness are more likely to be subject to disciplinary action. And, homeless liaisons work really hard, with local organizations to refer students to services and supports, but there really is a lack of, sufficient housing to meet the needs that many of our families face.
You've served in a number of task force over the course of your career around this issue. And when you think about some of the things that those educators, those leaders at our schools need to know about homelessness and the homelessness population, can you sort of elevate a few things that people are looking for? Because I think many of our listeners might have a fixed opinion of what it means to be a homeless individual.
Sure. Well, the definition under the Federal McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act says that any child or youth who lacks fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence is considered to be homeless under that law. So that's a very broad definition. Our largest population are those who are sharing the house of others due to a hardship, economic or other type of hardship. We call that doubled up. One family living with another family. Sometimes we call that couch surfing. We have our sheltered population, which many educators and people may just normally assume is the largest population, but it's really not. It is a significant population, but not the largest population. We also have what's called unaccompanied youth. That's any child or youth who's not in the direct care of a legal parent or guardian. And that's also a large population. That could be grandmom who's taking care of, her grandchildren. I mean, grandmoms do what grandmoms do, but at the same time, it could be due to hardship. Dad may be in jail. Mom may be, not, being her best self. She may have dropped the kids off and grandmoms are just filling in. It could be an aunt. I work with families. I've worked with older siblings who are taking care of their younger siblings. They're not the legal parent or guardian. So I think it's a lot of different categories under that fixed, regular, and adequate that people, may not be aware of, but I think it's really important. That's why we provide the trainings that we provide to kind of open eyes to the significance and the overall, it's a lot. For example, we've identified, close to 38,000 students, from birth to 12th grade in Pennsylvania. And we know that there's more than that. There's students who we know their name, we know their date of birth, we've been able to follow, support, and we know that there's more than that. And, so it's really, really it's a hidden epidemic.
38,000 individuals identified, right? And you're saying many more are probably not known. It just changes the perspective that I think our educators need to have when students walk into the door, right? Because many of educational outcomes that you've described are really preventing many of them from being successful and breaking some of these cycles that are in those categories. And so I really appreciate you sharing that with our listeners. I wonder, Dr. Quarles, during the past 18 months that we've been in the pandemic, have we seen shifts in the way that more and more people are coming into some of these categories of homelessness? Like, has the pandemic created some changes there that our listeners should be aware of?
The pandemic has. Let me say that it's really given us the charge to be more creative. That we've really had to be more creative in how we identify, locate, and remove barriers to students experiencing homelessness. As educators, as the state, we've really had to do that on our end. For the most part, I think that, families have continued to enter categories of homelessness similarly during the pandemic as they have before. I think it's just been a little more difficult to identify them. There were some things in place where, like moratoriums where families couldn't be evicted for a period of time, which helped a little bit. Just different situations. So it's been different, but it's been consistent. It's been tougher, internet was a bigger issue and, really making sure that they had access to FAPE, really making sure they could really, be in front of their teachers and continue to learn and have everything they need in some of these new situations, these new forms of homelessness per se. And, we really are working hard to make that happen. And not to be cliche, but it truly takes a village, and whoever's running the village, we have wonderful leadership from you, Mr. Secretary of the State, and, but on the school level, on the school level, whoever the liaison is, whoever's been identified to be the primary support truly has to have the capacity to do the work. They have to have a passion. This is probably as close to a ministry in education as you will find. Because, you're working with families who are really at their lowest point, and it's such a broad spectrum of families. You have the father who, is going through divorce and had to move back with, somebody in his family. And then you have, the person whose house burned down. You have the person who, has infestation, bed bugs and rodents, and they couldn't stay there. Houses right now in Philadelphia without heat. I mean, that's not adequate. If you're living in a house and that's not adequate, how is a student going to show up? They don't have heat, they don't have running water. How are they going to be their best self? They're going to be sleepy, they're going to be disheveled, they're going to be malodorous, they're going to not be their best self. So McKinney-Vento really is in place to remove these barriers. But at the top, as we're identifying our liaisons, it's really significant that the person has the capacity, they have the passion, and they're willing to really do the work. And I think we're, as our regional coordinators and our state coordinator and our chief, Carmen Medina, we're really working to make sure we have the right people in place. And we thank you for your support. This is amazing.
Thank you, Dr. Quarles. And I feel like for all of us, and yourself included, when you go into education as a profession, you truly do profess to live in the industry as you describe it. And I think that's really important. It occurs to me that as we're talking to this, and I do want to ask you a few questions about how can our schools work to address some of the issues for students facing homelessness. I wonder if you'd share with our listeners a little bit about what you do specifically in your day-to-day routines as well around this particular issue.
It's a great question. So we remove educational barriers primarily. That's primarily what we do. So here in Philadelphia, for example, we have a uniform policy. So we provide 4 brand new uniforms to every student we identify. Tops, bottoms, gym uniforms, if they need coats, if they need shoes, whatever they need to be their best self in school. That's some of the stuff we do. We do a lot of referrals. A lot of times families just don't know what they don't know. If it's housing, we'll refer here in Philadelphia to the Office of Homeless Services or to some of the partners we've worked with that can help remove some of the barriers, whether that's, they're in danger of becoming homeless and they need a little assistance, or, they need a food pantry or whatever that may be. We do our best to help remove those barriers. So, my job is different every day. Today I had a call from a mom who was staying in a hotel. She was wondering if we had hotel vouchers. She wasn't in the city. I had to contact one of my regional colleagues from a neighboring district. We're putting the systems in place. We're going to make sure her kids get enrolled today and, make some referrals to kind of get her settled and at least comfortable for tonight as we move forward. That's one example. I had a parent show up in my office today who didn't speak English, and she was having issues with her child. She was living in a situation where it was like numerous families living in one house. I think it was like 4 families living in a very small house. And, her child was having issues in school, and she needed to have a school more conducive to, where he was at and her needs. So we were able to kind of take a little pressure off of her with uniform assistance. And we reached out to the school. I talked to the principal. We worked with the Office of Student Enrollment and Placement to make sure that we can make these referrals and do these things. So that's 2 things that happened in the last couple of hours. But it's just a lot of stuff. I mean, it's different every day. Like I said, it's like a ministry. We're trying our best to make relationships with partners because we can't do it all. As educators, we can't do it all. So we're making the relationships with partners. We work with faith-based organizations. We work with our shelters. We work with the city. We work with LGBTQ organizations. It goes on and on and on, behavioral health organizations. We work with as many people as we can so that our toolkit is ready for when families come in, for their diverse needs, because it's always different. Like every case is different.
Yeah, for those listeners wondering what a regional coordinator for education for children experience homelessness program does, these are some of the things, wear many hats. It's unfortunate that we need to think about these kinds of coordinator positions at a school district, but I am pleased that the School District of Philadelphia has others working with you. I wonder for some of our schools, Dr. Quarles, who may not have the capacity and the infrastructure, but still face themselves with populations, as you described, particularly those experiencing homelessness coming in, how can our schools work with organizations in their communities to help students experiencing homelessness? Any advice for that?
Well, let me first say that the regional model that the Pennsylvania Department of Education put in place has 8 regional coordinators, and we're spread out around the state. We are a seasoned team of veterans. We all are constantly in communication with each other. We work very closely with the Department of Ed, and we would be your first line of contact. So, I believe that most schools are in contact with their regional coordinators. I know in Philadelphia, I work with all the charter schools, all the public schools, and I know that my colleagues are constantly out there in the field. So what I would say is we would be your first line of defense. We'll do trainings. We'll put systems in place if they're not already in place. We can, really kind of help build your toolkit. Every single school district in the entire state or in the country is required to have a McKinney-Vento liaison. So, here in Philadelphia, all of our charter schools have a liaison. In our public schools, it's our counselors who are our liaisons. Out in the across the state, every school district has a liaison. So that person, is trained, is equipped. If you don't know who that person is, I would say you should find that person. There are posters around, there's information around on the state's website. We have a list of all of the liaisons under Pennsylvania Department of Education. And, every school has someone listed. So I would say the regional coordinators would be your first line of defense. We can help build capacity. We can help train staff. A lot of what I do is training. One thing we talk about over COVID, one thing that happened positively over COVID is I personally trained over 2,000 people easily just through Zoom trainings and things like that. So we're really spreading the word. And that's what we do. That's what we're charged to do. We're charged to identify and remove barriers to students. And in order to do that, we need our schools. So we work closely with our schools. And let me just say this, any school district who believes that they do not have students experiencing homeless are incorrect. Anyone who says, oh, we don't have that here, or there's not a big issue here, or, whatever they're saying, that is incorrect. And I would just really encourage them to, consider the vast and the large definition of homelessness: fixed, regular, and adequate. Consider, that many folks do not want to come forward and let you know these things because they're afraid. They don't want you to report them. They don't think that, I'll be able to stay in my school. They don't think that, I'll get the supports, that are, required for us to do under McKinney-Vento. So, I would just say, continue to educate yourself, continue to look, and make sure whoever is in that role at your school district has the capacity, has the passion, and has the support from on top.
Fantastic, Dr. Quarles, and I appreciate that. And I think it's really sound advice for our schools to think about, not to feel as if you are not in this problem that is occurring in the moment, right? And then yes. I think the way here is look for the regional coordinators as the first line of defense to figure out how you're going to begin to form these partnerships. I wonder if you might also share, Dr. Quarles, maybe some of the key takeaways of your work with homelessness communities that have maybe emerged from the extensive research you've done on this topic that you think it's also worth elevating with the listeners. Some things that would really be food for thought for them.
Well, I guess I have a personal passion about I know that you have, previously worked in the Office of Post-Secondary Ed and Higher Ed, and, had a real passion for underrepresented populations. And, I did my doctoral work on when McKinney-Vento goes away. What happens when these safeguards and supports aren't there? I looked at the phenomenon of lived experience of unaccompanied youth and students experiencing homelessness coming out of foster care on college and university campuses. And I would just say, as we're working with our teenagers, it's the population that typically doesn't self-identify. They typically aren't saying, hey, I'm in a homeless situation, or, hey, I'm living with my girlfriend. Hey, my mom and dad aren't doing what they need to do. I'm just kind of bouncing around, right? So we have to really have a special lens when we're setting our students up or supporting our students to go away to higher education. One thing I've learned is some universities or colleges, have a single point of contact and they really do the work well. They're ready. They have a food pantry. They make sure you get, a job. They do this, they do that. And some colleges and universities really aren't ready for this population at this point. Pennsylvania is working to put things in place and different laws and things, which is wonderful because it's really needed. Through my research and working with a bunch of teenagers, which is why this originally became my passion. I was sending students away to college, and they were calling us, coming back to our office, saying, "Hey, can you help me out? I need a ride to school. I need $20. I need this." Stuff that we take for granted. So as we're preparing our students to go into higher education, I would just really think about that. Is this school the best fit for them? So that's another thing that we're doing. We're preparing students to be successful. We're really planting seeds and helping to guide them so that they can be the best them. And that's also what we're doing. And as we're making, and they can apply as an independent student. We can provide them with a letter that says when they're filling out the FAFSA that they're independent, that they get the additional, financial support and, things like that. But I mean, stuff as small as where are you going to stay over winter break when the dorms close and the cafeteria closes? And, so it's just stuff we need to take into consideration. But I think that we have great leadership at the Department of Ed under yourself, Mr. Secretary. And, our infrastructure is really here. We have passionate, seasoned veterans who are, at the helm, willing to do the work. And we just have to seek us out. If you seek us out, we will be here. My phone rings all day and I'm ready to answer it. And my colleagues do the same exact thing. Every time I call my state coordinator, Mr. Kumar at the state, he's there to support us. And, even above him, Miss Medina is phenomenal. So we're here. It's just a matter of reaching out to us and allowing us to help you help your students.
I appreciate, Dr. Quarles, the intersection you make between understanding what happens to the kids once they exit the K-12 system, right?
Yes.
Opportunities, those pathways as well. And I do think there's some important lessons that we need to begin to understand, particularly things that got some light shed on them during the pandemic, right? Our schools, our post-secondary institutions are not just about the provision of learning and instruction. They're about all these services, some of them life-sustaining, right? What happens to you in between that semester when folks vacate the dorms? What are you going to do for food? Where are you going to go? What kind of supportive environment you can find? I think these are things that we need to really begin to broaden our understanding on. And I really appreciate that you're elevating these with our listeners. Anything in terms of other resources that the department has to offer that you might want to highlight as well, Dr. Quarles? Please feel free to share anything that you think would be a worthwhile resource for our listeners to think about.
Well, I know that one thing that I'm really proud of as one of the regional coordinators is the Department of Education truly puts together a phenomenal conference every year. It's been virtual for the past 2 years, but not only do we highlight McKinney-Vento, from basic McKinney-Vento to the higher education piece that we're talking about now, we also look at foster care, even though they're different under the Every Student Succeeds Act. And, different provisions were put in place to support foster care as well as McKinney-Vento, but they kind of have separated them. But, we know that they run parallel. It's a very similar student. At the conference that the state puts on with the Centers for Schools and Communities, it's just a phenomenal opportunity for folks to learn. It's a free conference, and I would just encourage, to send your liaisons. We had several hundred people attend this year virtually. It was a very successful conference. But if I had to highlight anything that we're doing annually, there's an awesome conference where you can come out and learn about this population. We'll also go to your conference. We're always looking for an opportunity to go to different conferences. We go to social work conferences and, counselor conferences. We're out there. We do the best we can to get in front of as many groups as we can to talk about the McKinney-Vento Act. So, there's opportunities. If you need us to come out and do a training at your school, I have a regional coordinator I can send to you. If you need something in your community, I have someone I can send to you. So if any of these things ring a bell, just reach out. We can make it happen.
Dr. Quarles, and I appreciate you sharing that with the listeners. I think for many of us, if we can begin to find ways to promote awareness of students on our campus, at our colleges experiencing homelessness, the challenges that they face, but most importantly, the resources that are out there to help find solutions. This is a great way to begin to forge those partnerships. Dr. Quarles, thank you tremendously for joining us today. It's been an absolute privilege to talk with you today. And I hope that we can bring you back or some of your other coordinators again sometime in the future.
Secretary Ortega, we truly appreciate you, man. Just keep doing great things, and God bless.
Thank you, thank you. So I'm Noe Ortega, and thank you all who joined us today for Bell Ringer.